So thank you for that. That is a great way to think about it. We are going to get started. I love the chats coming in, appreciate all the things you guys are sharing. You know, my mind is racing after that conversation. And so just great to be here and excited to lead this conversation with Devin. Devin, do you want to do your introduction?
Sure. So it's great to see so many people here, some familiar names, old colleagues. Great to reconnect, as well as a lot of new faces and new names. So thank you for joining us. I'm Devin Vodicka. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at Altitude Learning. I've been in this role for about 3 years, and prior to that, I was superintendent of the Vista Unified School District in Southern California. And just really excited to get into this conversation today. And I'm very fortunate to be able to work with Katie, who did a fantastic job moderating the keynote conversation. And I'll turn it back over to Katie.
Great, thanks, Devin. So I am Katie Martin. I am always horrible at introducing myself. I just want to jump right in. I have formerly been a middle school teacher, coach, worked at the district office to support new teacher mentoring programs, which has really just kind of fueled my passion to think about systems and conditions that support educators to do their best work, to connect with kids and to create more powerful learning experiences. And so I'm excited to talk today. We had as Devin and I have been doing a lot of work talking with teachers, kids, families, both have kids of ourselves. We keep learning more and more what's possible, but also the barriers. And so we want to share a little bit with you of kind of what we've been learning and invite you in the conversation as well. So we did that. I want to start us off here. And this is, if you heard the keynote, this is essentially what we've just been talking about, this school-centered paradigm, and making this shift to learner-centered. And really, for me, learner-centered is always about keeping learners at the center. What do we want? What are our hopes and dreams? Who are they? What are their strengths and opportunities? And how do we keep that at the center and design the system around them and around the experiences that we want for them to really empower really powerful learning, not just in the classroom, but in a lifelong manner outside of our classroom. So this is really the shift that we're seeking, where learning is not just happening in schools, it's happening in learners wherever they are. So as we think about this, really the way that we have oriented, and Devin has done a lot of this research for us at Altitude around the desired learner outcomes. And it boils down to these 3 categories: agency, the knowledge and skills that individuals should have, but also that they can demonstrate mastery. They can work towards purposeful objectives. They set goals and work toward them. And then they use those skills that they have to work collaboratively with others. So building connections within their community, they can be relied on. This is the emotional intelligence that we talk about that's so important to be able to work with people in communities. And then you use your agency and your skills, your ability to collaborate in those habits to do work that's meaningful. And again, Maya hit this right on the head at the beginning. When you do things that are meaningful to yourself, to your community, to others, there's more motivation and inspiration to continue to learn and grow. And there's more willingness to work through the things that are challenging as well. And so as we think about learner-centered and what's possible, these are the things that we hold true at the core of what we're trying to accomplish and design systems that can help us develop these skills and habits and mindsets in our children. So at the core, again, there's 3 things. If we focus on learners, then we think about the authentic learning experiences that we want to design. We think about the agency we want learners to have. And then we want to ultimately get to this competency-based assessment. So, in the keynote today, the conversation's really talking about if we move from assessing what learners did, moving off this paradigm that we just have to check the list and get all the worksheets in and do a bunch of activities, how do we then instead shift to the assessment and self-assessment, videos, capturing portfolios, authentic work that students are doing. How do we use that to assess the competencies and help learners grow along those progressions? And when you think about problem solving, the best insight is from our students. I love getting feedback from experts, teachers, and students about problems is a good idea because you can get more info. And right now, as teachers, we can't be the sole source of information. Teaching a class, it's easy to get caught in the trap of, I have to get all the information I was going to teach them online. Instead of thinking, what are the things I want students to know and do? And how do I assess that they have developed those skills, not that they sat through and listened to me talk about them? It's hard. And it's a shift that is continually something that we have to work through. But Odyssey STEM Academy is one of our partners. And, as I mentioned, if we want to focus on collaboration and communication, we have to teach those skills, we have to model those skills, we have to assess those skills, and we have to let learners know where they are in relationship to that goal. So if we create systems that are competency based, we can really move learners towards this instead of saying, oh, you should be collaborative, without giving them any insight or support to get there. So I love this, really, the assessments and success indicators really match up with the vision of what we want for students. So I'm going to shift, and Devin's going to share a little bit about why there is a need. And I know many people on this call are thinking we're there, but why there's a need for us to move in this direction.
Yeah, so thanks, Katie, for the overview. That's just a little bit of a high level of how we think about learner-centered education. We're going to go into a bit of the why, and then we're going to get into how and sharing some examples, and all of that will lead into some of our initial thoughts around new school models or models for schooling in this adaptive future. And we know that learner-centered education is not a new thing. Teachers back in one-room schoolhouses were learner-centered. Both Katie and I have parents, moms that were teachers, and as kids, we saw our parents implementing learner-centered approaches. But as was touched on in the keynote, these efforts, while they have existed in pockets and in particular classrooms, particular schools, particular communities, they've not been widespread. And as a result, we've had a system that tends to be pretty rigid, built for the industrial age with this one-size-fits-all model. And the result of that is that you see that as kids move through the grade spans, they become increasingly disengaged because they're not seeing themselves in that educational process. They're not connecting with their strengths, their interests, their values. And as a result, they're disengaging. And in many cases, they're just departing the system entirely. That's why graduation rates have been stuck around 80% for 50 years now. And having 20% of our kids not even finish high school is a pretty significant problem even before this pandemic. And in the world around us, the rate of change has just been picking up. So go ahead to the next slide, Katie. We know from Moore's law that the pace of change has just been picking up, fueled frequently by these accelerations in technology. But the result of that also is increasing global interconnectedness. And if we didn't believe that before, a global pandemic will certainly reinforce our interconnectedness in new ways. So the rate of change outside of schools is speeding up. Students are increasingly disengaged within schools. And we know, that within, sorry about that, within schools, we see massive opportunity and achievement gaps by income, by race. So we have had fundamental problems that need to be addressed and that needed to be addressed even prior to the coronavirus pandemic. And so where we are now is a very unique place where just in the United States, more than 50 million students cannot attend school. We have moved into what I've seen best described as emergency remote instruction. This was unplanned, and it's been varied in terms of what we're seeing And you were heard in the keynote, that we cannot overstate the fundamental needs that exist, just tied to like life, health, basic needs, food security, shelter. These are things that must be front and center in our thinking. And while, yes, a lot of the attention gets into things like devices and connectivity, these are really unprecedented times that challenge all of us to just be at our best. And at the same time, as we're confronted with these incredible challenges, we also have more opportunity in some ways than we've ever had, because all of these perceived constraints around seat time, standardized testing, grade point averages, they're all out the window. And so the things that we have said for a long time have been barriers to risk-taking, to implementing new models, those are all gone. And so what we see across schools is people moving through different phases or stages of response. Obviously, beginning at that basic access and safety level, moving into some level of subsistence learning, trying to get into deeper learning. And now we're seeing more educators and school leaders starting to think ahead to what is around the corner, where are things going next? And that's really where we're going to devote a lot of our energy in this conversation. And so one of the things that is pretty frightening is all of the data that I'm seeing says that this is not going away anytime soon. This is data from MIT scientists that have done lots of different models based on epidemiology. And they are projecting that it's probably 18 months before we get back to something like what we had before this, and that it's going to be coming in these waves that kind of rise and fall, and that we will be compelled to be in a very different state for quite some time. And we're seeing that same insight, not just from MIT, but even county offices of education. Katie and I are in San Diego County, and our county office of ed recently put out guidance telling school leaders to plan on 18 months of preparation for something different with schools. And that is a long time. We've been in this situation for about 2 months presently, but 18 months is a long horizon. So we need to be thinking deeply about what can we do during an extended period of global disruption to ensure that we're doing our best to serve our kids. And so we see that there are likely 3 modes that are going to be required. In person, I believe, is the best. If we can be together, we're social learners. We want to learn in community, and that's what we ought to strive to do. But the reality is that with social distancing and other types of impacts from the coronavirus, we're probably more likely to be in some type of a hybrid state where students sometimes come to a physical campus and sometimes are doing remote learning. And it's very possible that we are going to be in a remote state exclusively for extended stretches of time. So we believe that school leaders need to be preparing for all 3 of these modes of schooling. And when we think forward to how we prepare, one of my favorite models or frameworks comes from Heifetz, and he talks about the distinction between a technical problem versus an adaptive challenge. A technical problem being something that is easy to identify, lends itself to a known solution, and where a quote expert can basically tell you how to do it, and you can repeatably end up with a reliable solution. An adaptive challenge is much more complex, much more unknown. And in an adaptive context, the people who have the problems need to work together to come up with the solutions. They're going to be highly contextualized, and it's going to take experimentation to get to these new discoveries. There's actually a third type of challenge, which is just chaos. And what we hope to do today is keep us centered in this realm of an adaptive challenge, where we're going to try to provide some structure to what is right now a very challenging situation. But we know that no one has the solutions that are going to be repeatably applied as you might see in a technical type of model. So what we're really hoping to do is invite you into the space of helping us to identify the problems, potential solutions, and have this mindset around how we can together make progress that again best serves our learners. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Katie for the next section.
Great. I am admitting people, running slide decks, and navigating my mic. So
You're doing great. Thank you.
Definitely have some technical challenges over here. So we want to make sure to leverage the tools and get you guys in community to talk. So we are going to try the capabilities of Zoom and want to put you in groups of about 4 and just give you an opportunity to brainstorm with somebody else from around the world to just check in and say, what problem do we think we're trying to solve? We're going to spend, that's not the slide I want. We're going to spend just 10 minutes in these rooms, and I will bring you back manually. So it'll give you a warning. But let's see. So start thinking. This is your think time. While the breakout rooms are forming, this is your time to think about what problem you think we are trying to solve. And presently, the problem I'm trying to solve is breakout rooms. So let me stop sharing for a moment. There we go. All right. You're headed out to 52 different breakout rooms. We'll see you in 7 minutes. It should invite you to say, go to a room. If your room doesn't work, come back and let us know. Let's see. Are we in them? Oh, it's supposed to send you. Let me recreate them. My apologies. Well, it's not sending you to them. You should be magically gone. Any Zoom experts out there know why my screen's not letting me send them to you?
I am not a Zoom expert.
The max might be 50 rooms.
Ah, okay, so I'm in delete a room. That might be why. See, I have never tried to do 50 rooms. There it is. Whoever that was, thank you very much. There you go.
Well done, team.
Takes a village. Hi, Nina.
Hi, did I miss it? I was on my computer. I logged out so that I could get on my iPad with the video, and I was trying to do it fast, but I think I missed your little breakout.
Going to the breakout. So let me see
Going
if I
into
can
the small group.
Let me see if I can put in.
Put me in Magdalena Castro's group. She just left. Hold on and get my AirPods connected while you were doing that.
See, how do I don't want to put you in a waiting room. I want to put you in a breakout room. You might be assigned, Nina. Do you see a place where it says like go to breakout room? Choose like where you can.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
I can
so
just
you're assigned. Just go there. Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Only
No,
you have permission.
thank you. Appreciate that. So this model is really just to push our thinking about, in a standardized model, we have policies, schedule, curriculums. We have so many things that are coming at us to the teacher who's expected to make sense of all of it and funnel it into all of the students in the classroom. They get the same thing. And at the end, it's test, rank, sort, and select. This is a very simplified model of how the system was designed. And as Devin pointed out, there are many learner-centered educators and mindsets that prevail in our schools. Not to say they don't, but our system itself was not designed for that. So at every step of the way, you find yourself bumping up against, oh my gosh, it's hard to do this. It's hard to get feedback and do competency-based assessment because our system was designed for a much more standardized model. So if we look to the right and think about a learner-centered paradigm, if we start with learner outcomes, we start with our progressions and milestones. What are the things we want learners to accomplish and do? What do we want them to learn? And map those out. Then we can think differently about our learning experiences in a way that we have, what if we have teams of teachers, not just one teacher responsible for kids, but what if we work together, even in elementary school, in these teams to support learners? My son's class, the 4th grade team, has decided to work together to design lessons across the team. And then the teachers check in with their kids individually, but they're all leveraging their strengths and talents to create things online and to meet the kids' needs. And then they're not overwhelmed and totally stressed out. And then the other thing is, if we look at learners at the center, there are many ways our kids can learn. Think about, universal design for learning, where we design an opportunity, but give kids opportunities to make choices about how they engage, how they learn, and how they show what they know. Teachers are great, mentors and experts online, hands-on experiments, YouTube videos, peer collaboration, books and articles. There's tons of resources. We don't have to be the sole resources. And so as we think about this shift, I love this quote by Oscar Wilde: "Without order, nothing exists." We know that our system has stuck around for so long because it provides order and structure, and it's predictable. But without chaos, nothing evolves. And I think we can say we're pretty much right in the middle of chaos. And so it's pushed us to think about, we are going to evolve one way or another after this pandemic and as we move forward. So how do we think about how we want our system to evolve in a way that is best for learners and best for teachers and families and communities as well? So this first part for us, when we think about schools and we think about designing the new way, and many schools are already doing this, but this is, if we think about systems, moving from knowledge as the sole target to really shifting to these learner-centered outcomes, which are about whole child, that you're developing the skills, the habits, and the knowledge, and then learning to learn. So many people say, and I've heard this time and time again, that this pandemic has really shone a light on the passivity of our children. And what that means is our kids in school can sit down, they can check something off on the board, they complete an assignment, they turn it in. They may not have learned anything, they may not have gained much, but they can turn it in and move through the system very compliantly if they're just there showing up and paying attention. When they're home, and my kids we went through some serious productive struggle the first couple weeks. My son was like, "This is hard. I don't know what to do. I'm not there to check on him all the time and guide him along the way." And so it was frustrating and felt really unsuccessful. But today, in his check-in with his teacher, he noted, "I'm getting the hang of it. 3 weeks later, I feel successful. I'm really proud of the work I've done over 3 weeks." And so it takes time to really develop these skills and teach them and hold kids accountable for them. And I think that there's a huge opportunity at the end of 18 months or whatever it is, that our kids can come back to school in a face-to-face setting, knowing who they are, knowing what they care about, knowing their strengths, and having the capacity to learn in really meaningful and personal ways. So this is like two examples. Logan County Schools is a district. Odyssey STEM Academy is a school. So wherever your sphere of influence is, again, these are the vision statements or the learner profile, what we want for kids. And making this visible is absolutely the first step, but it can't be the last step. This is where we identify and we bring the community together, say, this is where we're going, this is what matters, and this is what we're gonna really focus our attention on. And then when we do that, this is, just an example, but we have a set of milestones. Many people do. Standards often get really granular. So we've tried to think about how we look at these as competencies and milestones in grade bands to help kids move, progressively through the content. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but you need foundational skills and you need authentic learning projects. And we need to be able to put these two together in a way that meets the needs of individual students. And too often systems go heavy one way or the other. Sorry, I'm admitting people. And so in order to do that, we need to design curricula and resources that really address individual needs and authentic projects as well. So individual playlists, there's a lot of resources that can help you. Khan Academy, Estimate, there's a lot of things, but just left on their own, kids will get really bored just clicking through computerized programming. But if it's done in a way that it meets the needs of an individual and their goals, then they can learn these foundational skills that are self-paced. And then the focus of the teachers and the resources can be on designing these authentic experiences that actually help kids understand, again, like Maya said, a project that helps me know who I am, what matters in the world, that are more contextualized. And often these experiences align with these characteristics of learner-centered experiences. They're projects that are personal, where kids have agency to do something. It's not a recipe to create a project. It's about inquiry, working with families, community, your peers, doing something that's authentic and that matters. There's critique and revision, because you don't just like know something, you have to get feedback and grow. And that means it's hard, there's productive struggle, but we still are oriented to the goals, there's accountability, and there's opportunities to see models and reflect. And so when these things are more prevalent, then we have more authentic experiences in our schools and outside of our schools. So just a few examples. My poor kids, their lives just get to be put on display. But, in the classrooms, we see wonder boards and things like this that help kids really think about, what do I care about? What do I want to know about? And when kids have the opportunity to ask questions and investigate things that matter to them, they're way more invested in their learning. And so this is my daughter making lotion while she's eating breakfast. They were making meringues, and she was live streaming a cooking session and doing some experiment where they were burning something in the front yard. My husband was there too. But there's opportunities to have kids do this at home, because we don't have to move from period 1, period 2, period 3. We can create days that are more modular and more learner-centered. And, so I think Eric's here. I don't know if Camille's here, but this is actually Devin's son's class. This is a great example that I love to share from a 5th grade teacher, Camille Nunnenkamp, who has designed the day in school around what kids need to know, what they wonder, what they want to learn. There's experiences that they're focused on. And I love how we're making an impact. Everybody wants to do something that makes an impact. And so these are projects that you could also do and design for your kids to do at home. They can still be investigating a similar topic. They can still be collaborating with one another, but doing things that, that actually make a difference. And even right now, kids are wondering, like, how do I help my community? How do we help people who need food? How do we get resources? There's food shortages. There's a lot of things that kids could be investigating and helping us figure out. And so the last piece really here is we think about learner profile, learning experiences, and then the assessment matters. So really thinking about learners at the center, who they are, their own strengths, interests, and goals, setting up opportunities for small group and check-in, and then how they demonstrate their learning. Doesn't always have to be filling out a worksheet. So these are some key shifts that we really have focused on as we move away from traditional metrics of our system and assessment, from seat time, GPAs, discrete subjects, sorting and selecting. So that's typically how we assess kids and move them to the next level. If we instead move to competencies that encompass knowledge, skills, and habits, and think about goals, evidence, portfolios, we can really look at informing learning and really think about moving it to, instead of just documenting and doing the autopsy of what was done. So this is my daughter's learner profile, which I love. It was one of her projects, but this is a great thing for kids to do, to say, who am I? What a great project to do at home. How do I like to learn? What do I notice about myself? Strategies that work for me, and things that I'm interested in. And when students are guided to create this, then when you say, what do you want to research? What do you want to do? They go, oh yeah, my learner profile, I understand that. Because oftentimes people say, go do a project, investigate what you want. And a lot of people are just paralyzed. I don't know what to study. I don't know what I'm interested in. So we do have to do some guiding and supporting to help really tap into those interests. Setting goals. I love this example of really, again, this is not just academic. One of the goals this child had was to be able to talk to more people and to be more confident in public. And you see from January to March, her progression of being able to be really shy. And, I kind of asked a question versus now I feel comfortable introducing myself because I had practice and I worked on something over time. And this is a skill kids will need outside of school, as they get jobs and as they interact with people. And so it's something we want to make sure to support. And then I already mentioned the learning profile, but again, learner agency isn't something that just happens. In school, often people are used to being compliant, they're used to sitting and going through the motions. And so providing voice and choice and really teaching those skills about how to manage your time, how to focus, set goals, persevere. Again, I mentioned my son. This is hard for kids. It's hard for adults. We have to teach them and model these skills and help them through it. And this is Joe, who kicked off our summit today, has done a really nice job of putting together this chart of knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And when you have those things together, you have a life-ready learner. When you're missing knowledge, you're confused. You might have skills and the dispositions to want to learn, but you don't actually have knowledge. So you're not really able to have those meaningful conversations and use it. When you don't have skills, you could be frustrated. And when you don't have the dispositions, often there's a lot of apathy. We know kids who are very academically talented, they have skills, but they just don't have the dispositions and they disengage. And so we need all three of those. And really this is around, this cycle of moving from teacher being the one always leading the way to really about co-leading with students and giving them opportunities to engage. And ultimately, we want them to leave our classrooms, our schools, and our systems being able to lead their own learning so they can be successful and navigate their own path. And so Devin's going to share some insight on how we can put this all together to think about those new models we were talking about.
Yeah, so just to recap, we know learner-centered education is not new. It's about empowering our learners through agency, competency-based assessment, and authentic learning experiences. We know that there are examples where this is happening in schools and out of schools. And now we're at this state where we want to be reconsidering, well, how would we rebuild the system based on what we know today about what works to empower our learners and based on what we know about what's possible. And so on the next slide, we propose 5 building blocks that we would suggest could be foundational in design for new schools. And Katie touched on it several times, but I think it's worth just restating over and over again, which is you have to be clear on what you're trying to achieve as a first step. What are those whole child outcomes, the knowledge, habits, and skills? How do we help students learn how to learn? We also know from a lot of research that having a certain size group can be helpful for social cohesion and collaboration as well. So Dunbar's number is a mathematical principle that's evolved. Communities tend to break into 2 sub-communities once you get beyond 150 students. We also have seen lots of different experimentation around the right age groupings for students. And we believe that about 2 years worth of grade bands together seems to be what works best. So you don't get too much of a developmental range. And we think heterogeneous groups are the way to go moving forward. And to promote strong teacher collaboration, if you get beyond 8, you tend to split into 2 subgroups. So the magic number is somewhere between 5 and 7 teachers supporting that group of 150 or less students if you have the ability to have that optimal design. Katie also talked a lot about curriculum, how it's important to remember that foundational skills are critical. Knowledge is absolutely critical. And we also want to make sure that students are engaged in real world problem solving through interdisciplinary projects. And we need to demonstrate what students are able to do through this competency-based assessment approach. We would also say that learning is highly contextualized. This has to be a community-based process. We are big fans of human-centered design, and we know that these models are going to evolve and grow based on implementation in different places. And so following this design thinking model, I think there were a couple of posts in the chat around liberatory design. absolutely essential to build our knowledge around how to best serve our learners. Go ahead, Katie, you're doing great. So thinking back to those three modes, remote, hybrid, and in-person, these are some of the activities that we think work pretty well in remote settings when we think about what students can do independently or individually and what can be done in more of a community-based or collective way. And they're just suggestions, but we think it's important, again, to balance the self-paced opportunities for independent practice with engagement collaboratively with real-world challenges, design challenges, intensive research, and inquiry. We also believe that if we're in this remote setting, we can be expansive in terms of how we think about the use of time. So this is just a mock schedule that we built up for a hypothetical group of 4 teachers. Could be 4 teachers that are in the 4th and 5th grades. It could be 4 teachers that are in a particular subject area in the secondary level. Could be an interdisciplinary team. But by focusing on these building blocks and thinking about how you get to these authentic learning experiences, as well as promoting that independent practice and self-paced learning, we think that there are a lot of options to extend the learning in new and creative ways. Let's go to the next one. So in the hybrid model, our starting point is to say we should orient to independent practice being done remotely, where students are often isolated, and leveraging the fact that they're in community for more of the authentic learning experiences, and taking advantage of those collaborative opportunities. So as school leaders are thinking about this potential for some in-person, some remote, we would suggest that it's critical to think about how you're going to make best use of that time when learners are together. And we think focusing on authentic learning is where we would start. And on the next one, in person, of course, you can do all of this. And we have great examples of that. And it's important, again, to be thinking about both that self-paced independent practice as well as those authentic learning experiences. So really, we know we've shared a ton of information. We do it in the hopes that it helps to potentially provide some structure in what is a very chaotic situation here. It's a hypothesis to get us closer to that balance between order and chaos that we've talked about several times in this chat. But we also know that these are not the final answers. These are just starting points to get us moving. And I love Margaret Wheatley. She's one of my favorite authors. She always says leaders should ask 2 questions. One is who cares? The second is what's possible. Obviously, you care about these questions because you're here. We would encourage you to expand your circle of inclusivity by asking who else should be involved in these conversations. But we also need to be shifting away from challenge to possibility and think about what we can achieve together. And we want to invite you to be part of an ongoing conversation about what we might be able to do together to reimagine school, reimagine learning, coming out of crisis into a place of great possibility for each of our kids. So we definitely want to stay connected. I saw some questions in the chat about how we can do that. One, you can go to our organization's website, altitudelearning.com. There's a lot of information there. There are guides for remote learning, guides for authentic learning, and many other resources. We put our email addresses up here. Pretty easy to remember, either Devin or Katie at altitudelearning.com. And then we're pretty easy to find on social media also. We've got our Twitter handles here, but you can find us on LinkedIn or other places as well. And we really are serious when we say we hope this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation. And then moving on, I'm a big fan of Katie's book, Learner-Centered Innovation. Just finished listening to the audiobook last week, which you can check out. And I'm also, humbled that I have a book that came out last week on learner-centered leadership. I would encourage you to check out both of these books, give us feedback, ask us questions at any point in time. Again, we see this as being a collaborative process to better serve our kids. And so I'm going to ask Katie if you have any concluding thoughts here.
Not many more than just deep gratitude for being here and taking time on your Tuesday to show up. And like Devin said, obviously you care, which means you're doing great work in your schools, in your communities, with your own families likely. So thank you for leaning in. Thank you for looking to the possibility, and please let us know how we can support. And we would love to continue this journey and think about how we create these models and more in communities across the world and country. So thank you.
That's right. Gratitude.
Yeah, and we're around for, if anyone has questions. So if you want to hang out and have any questions, feel free to stay on for a little minute.
That's right.
Other than that, have a great afternoon, and thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you guys for putting this together, Devin and Katie. This is Bill Walsh from down at Chula Vista. Thank you guys.
Hi, Bill. I recognize that voice.
Yeah, how you doing? How you doing?
Good.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, it's good to see you. We're trying to innovate. We're declining enrollment down in the South Bay. We're losing a lot of kids to the charters and such. And so we're looking towards a design and innovation academy kind of model like Shigella up there in Vista. So Devin, how are you doing? It's been a long time.
I'm doing great, Bill. Yes, I think we worked together, what, late 90s, early 2000s?
Way back in the day. Way back.
Right. Great to reconnect. Yeah, we're happy. I'm happy to hear you're thinking about like a design thinking model for a school.
It has to be. It has to be. We're talking about, and the conversations we're having in our faculty meetings is trying to get people to think in a new paradigm and answer the question, why should kids come to our school? And so, and I'm very, very fortunate this faculty's embraced that. Anyways, I got to run. You guys, it's great to see you. We'll see you again around.
Let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you, guys. So glad to have joined this conversation. My name is Jacob from Nigeria. This is actually the best webinar I've joined during this period of the national lockdown. I've learned a lot from Katie, Devin, and all of the teachers that made presentation. And I noticed that I think I'm the only non-professional educator that attended this event from Africa. So I like to keep this conversation going and see us in Nigeria are not computer literate. Schools have been shut for 1 month and then no form of learning per se is actually going on. So I really look forward to seeing how we can extend this conversation, not only in the US or Canada, but see how we can work in Nigeria. There are a lot of prospects in Nigeria. We have young people who are taking up new career paths in education, but the challenge is we do not have the expertise. We don't have professionals like you to hold trainings. So I really look forward to working with you guys and seeing how we could build the conversation and see how we can have a better network of educators in Nigeria. So in closing, I hold 2 bachelor's degrees, 1 in law and the other in public administration. So I look forward to seeing how I can become a professional educator and then scale up advocacy for quality education also in Nigeria. Once again, thank you for the privilege to join this webinar. So amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you so much. I'll say just quickly, my dad is Czech, and when I was a kid, he would plan weeks in advance to have a short phone call with a relative of his in Europe. And, here we are having, video chats with leaders from Nigeria and all across the world. And it's pretty amazing to think about how we can be closer together through these types of exchanges. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, sure.
You go, Mary. Mary, you got all go after you.
Okay. We're working on building these kinds of design thinking sessions and summits here in Nevada, where I am. Do you have a possible way of training or working with us to leverage the information you've just shared and help us architect the the contextual development of this kind of thinking across the community? That I would love that.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In the spirit of design thinking and human-centered design, you know, we typically work with people and understand the needs and goals and think about how we can create those conditions and support. So you can email us and we would love to chat and see how we can support.
Great. I love your book, Katie. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you, Mary.
If I can jump in with a question. I'm from Australia, so we're in the early stages of sort of remote learning. But in transitioning from a traditional model, and so we've just sort of gone from our traditional teaching face-to-face, trying to do it online. Teachers are so overwhelmed with that at the moment and preparing what they think is their normal way of preparing. Do you have any thoughts on how you transition from that, like in real time, I guess, so we're still delivering remote classes, but be transitioning in real time to a more learner-centered model?
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quickly, but what I have seen be the most successful is one in that transition to remote learning that is, like Devin said, emergency remote learning, is really think about how we can deprioritize things. There's so much we're trying to cram into the day. And, you know, I'm teaching a class right now with a bunch of teachers and they're like, I'm so afraid of not being perfect. And I'm so afraid of not doing everything for my kids. So de-risk that for them, love them, support them, and deprioritize so many of the things that are on teachers' plates and really get to, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to make sure that kids are safe. They feel like they belong somewhere, that they're seen, and that they are making progress and doing something of value during their day. And so check-ins, you know, helping with resources for kids, but the, you know, 6 days of online learning and trying to get every video up in a perfect lesson, not necessary. And in a lot of ways, it's not actually helping kids because it's too much for them as well. So I'd say that's one. And then when you do that, you start to see what actually rises to the top as the most helpful and impactful. And those nuggets are going to be what move you forward in the learner-centered practices. The third part is I've seen a lot of people, like Pam mentioned today, a gratitude journal or just a journal about what's working. Asking kids day in and day out what they're noticing, what's working, what they actually like about learning from home. And you start to see these things emerge about like, oh, I got to do a project with my dad. I got to collaborate with my sister. I had more time to do things when I wanted to do it. So really unearthing those things as well is helpful.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Kate.
I had a quick comment and a question.
Sure.
You were definitely preaching, I'm part of the choir. You were definitely preaching to the choir. So I love everything you're doing and look forward to reading both of your books. I can do that because I'm a retired teacher. So my observation from social media and from being involved in other sessions like this on other sites is that mostly teachers are so overwhelmed that they can't begin to think about all these issues, and that it's mostly people like me that are either retired teachers or people in positions of leadership who have to be thinking about it, or other groups or organizations like yourself that are doing it. And my question simply was, is that what you have found too, that the people in the trenches right now are so overwhelmed that it's hard for them to even begin to think about the changes that might even be possible because they're so, what they've been doing, they're just, it's so ingrained in them. I'm just curious on your observation on that.
I'm happy to share, but I want to give space for Devin too, if you have something you want to jump in and share.
You can lead. That's great. Okay. Go ahead.
I had the same observation until I sat in with teachers in different communities, and I sat in a leadership meeting of a district recently, and the principals and teachers were saying, they were talking about the highlights and challenges, and many shared, even though they're not on social media, that they were feeling a sense of calm because they were able to prioritize. Like I was just sharing with Phil, they were able to get rid of things that they didn't think mattered And with the administration giving them that, that permission essentially to do that, people are really starting to feel free. And they're also realizing, I have to use some of these tools of technology because they're helpful and they're letting me connect with kids. So there's a purpose to learn new tools as opposed to things that were just going to disrupt my teaching. So I don't disagree that many are overwhelmed. However, there is a strong tipping point, as someone said, of teachers are starting to see that there's opportunities. They just might not be on social media.
Okay.
My experience in Puerto Rico confirms that in the absolute worst possible disaster after Maria, where there was no communication and nothing working and no school, obviously, teachers were first responders, teachers were emotional check-ins for families. They were working harder than anyone just to find their students. And on top of all of that, they wanted to talk, Peter, about how we can be, in the most straightforward way possible, what students need. And they welcomed design thinking as a set of tools, right? Like, we rely on the process, right? We don't know where it's going to go. I was hesitant to try to teach them something new in the middle of all of that. And they were like, no, actually, it gives us something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Because we can do this step, and then we can do that step, and then we can do that step, and we can include some community leaders and parents and students in our conversation about what really matters, what we're going to focus on.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, just one last thought on that is, I don't remember where this comes from, but I love that saying that people own what they create. And I think we need to be including as many people as possible in the creation of the emerging solutions. Teachers are going to be a huge part of that. Students are going to be a huge part of that. Parents are going to be a huge part of that. And we should be orienting to bringing in many different perspectives to help us together come up with better and better approaches.
Tiara, did you had a question, I thought, earlier?
Hi, thank you. No, I just had, your quote, your Oscar Wilde quote was perfect. I mean, spot on through all this chaos. It has really, I'm a realistic, optimistic thinker. I like to think of it that way, and that this has provided opportunities for our teachers to pull and tug at that creativity that we know they all have. And when they do become overwhelmed and they express that to me, I ask them to just really focus on the relationships that they've spent building since the beginning of the year with their students. And as soon as I gave them the green light to make that their first priority, I have to tell you, I just felt the pressure from them just really, it was just released. And I just tell them, focus on the relationships, make sure that there's equity with everything that we're doing. Are you providing supports for the kiddos, the social emotional supports, the academic supports? And just focus on the relationships first and foremost, and then the personalized learning and instruction comes naturally. So that's just my perspective in the learning that I've had to go through with this whole experience. Thank you for putting this together, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really great.
One of the most inspirational principles. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
I love what Tiara said, partly because I think that teachers are at the center of student-centered learning too. And I think that we often don't think very much about how we can make sure teachers are healthy. And teachers need to be healthy. And what Tiara said is like, almost made me cry, because the fact that her teachers just needed to hear that it was okay for them to just focus on caring, that makes all the difference, right? Because teachers are grieving not having that day-to-day informal interaction with their kids, right? The check-in that we don't have to worry about because we just see the kids and we just feel the kids and we're in the presence of the kids. And I think that that is really missing. And it makes me, I've always been very concerned, but it also makes me very concerned to make sure that teachers know how to do trauma self-care.
Yeah.
And they know how to recognize when they are becoming overwhelmed, and that our school administrators and our communities help teachers and parents with this responsibility to themselves first. Just as first responders, right, have to be trained that way, we need to train our teachers that way too, and make them feel like it's okay to take care of themselves. And parents. And grandparents who are teaching at home.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all again so much. This has been awesome. I just saw Krista's face for the first time. Hi, Krista.
Hi.
So fun
Great
to
to see a lot of, yeah. Great to see a
Krista.
lot of Vista people on the on this chat.
Yeah, Krista and Sarah, good friends. Great to
Very
see
cool.
new faces and some familiar faces. But we're grateful for you.
This is what I needed on a Tuesday.
Well, we are going to continue the conversations, and we'll be sending out surveys to figure out like how we can continue to support and share resources. So this isn't just a one-time thing, but we want to continue to learn and grow. So definitely share anything that you have, any ideas, because we're all in it together. Anything else?
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you. Take care.
Yep. Bye.